Now I have the control.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. So I will go deeper in results-based payment. So maybe I like it to start for providing the general framework. I can move to the next. Okay. I want to start with the general framework on the under the UNFCCC, that is the Paris Agreement. So the international community general agree on the key role of forests in play in climate change mitigation and adaptation, and the Article 5 of the Paris Agreement call for action on reducing emission for deforestation and forest degradation, and this is the acronym so far. And the plus is and the role of conservation, sustainable management of forests, and enhancement of forest carbon stock in developing country partners. And also recognize the alternative policy approaches such as joint mitigation and adaptation approaches for the integral and sustainable management of forests. Countries are increasingly recognizing this role, including the importance of the LULUCF sector, land use change, and forestry in their pledges, the national determined contributions submitted to the UNFCCC. Around 75% of the countries that have submitted on or updated the NDC have the LULUCF sector as a priority sector to achieve their targets. And also that it's relevant to finance is that the majority of those countries and actions included in the indices are conditional to international climate finance. So let's go to the overall. Just to give you a sense of the level of engagement of countries. I am having some problems with, okay. Okay, this slide is just to give you a sense of magnitude about the engagement of countries in this process of REDD+ under the convention. Here in the graph, you can see in the upper side the number of countries that have submitted the reference emission level to be assessed by the UNFCCC. 56 countries so far has submitted this reference level from 2014 to 2022. And in the lower part of the graph, you can see the 19 countries that have submitted mitigation results regarding to the REDD activities to the for the technical analysis process from the UNFCCC side. The results add up about 1.5 billion of tons of CO2 that have been presented by countries as mitigation results in that frame of REDD+. So let's go right now to finance, to finance, where what is one of the objectives of the session today. There are other developments talking about results-based payment, compliance markets, and voluntary carbon markets that will be presented later, and different sources as the Green Climate Fund and Forest Carbon Partnership as the main multilateral initiatives that have provided results-based payment to countries, and new emerging opportunities that are depending of other standards as BERRA or R3s, that will facilitate the access to further results for based payment, for example, from the LIFE initiative that has been launched last year during the COP, and that has pledged about $1.5 billion to countries that present results from 2022 to 2026. Now I want to go more in detail on some of the specific financial initiatives that has already provided finance to countries. So I wanted to talk in the next slide about the GCF REDD Plus pilot program that was launched in 2017. This pilot program had an envelope of 500 million to recognize results-based actions undertook by countries. This finance was already disbursed through the accredited entities for 8 countries that have presented the results to the GCF and that meet the requirements pointed out in the term of reference of this program. Then we have the World Bank, that is the fiduciary of the Forest Carbon and Partnership Facility, Carbon Fund specifically, that has a fund of $775 million, of which about 721 million were already committed under the emission reduction purchase agreement. 6% of this amount of money was already disbursed for 3 countries that have demonstrated results to the FCPF. Also following the methodological guidance of the FCPF. And then we have bilateral agreements where mainly we have the REDD Early Movers program led by Germany, and the joint declaration of intention bilateral agreement signed by Norway with some countries, and here they have provided about $1.5 billion in finance to countries that are here in this in this graph. In the next slide, I will show specific examples of the GCF REDD Plus pilot program. I want to make emphasis in this program because this is the GCF is the financial mechanism of the UNFCCC. So this is supporting the implementation what is stated, for example, in the Paris Agreement and in the Article 5 that call also to support the results-based payment of countries. Here in the screen, you can see 4 of the 8 examples of countries that have received results-based payment from the GCF. This is the example of Costa Rica that presented results for emission reductions in 2014 and 2015. They received about $54 million. As I mentioned it before, was already disbursed through the accredited entities before the GCF. We have also Indonesia that have received about $103 million for results presented from 2014 to 2016. We have Argentina that received $82 million, and that this program has a strong focus on sustainable and integrated forest landscapes in Argentina, including a program to integrate livestock and forests in the project. And then we have Colombia that has received $28 million, and that focused its proposal in transformation the forest economy, so close related with sustainable forest management and strengthening of the governance of indigenous territories in Colombia. So here you can see what were the requirements for these countries to access to this finance. So in line with the Article 5 and the further decisions of the UNFCCC, all these countries had to demonstrate that they had in place a national REDD+ strategy or action plan that has submitted to the UNFCCC the forest reference level, that is the reference against of which the results are demonstrated, and that has followed a technical assessment process. Then countries had to demonstrate that they had in place a national forest monitoring system. Normally, it should be described in the technical annex that is submitted with the biennial update report. And then countries had to demonstrate they have in place system information on safeguards, and that they have submitted a summary of information on REDD+ safeguards. All these elements should be uploaded in the REDD+ in Lima Info Hub, that is the official place of the convention to demonstrate the results. I wanted just to share what is the link to this REDD Info Hub that is in the chat. Now I go in more detail in the example of Chile, because Chile was one of the countries. They received $63 million for resource-based payment, and this is one of the examples where the results come from enhancement of carbon stocks. It means restoration activities related to restoration process. So, and the proceeds will be or are being using to strengthen this process at national level. So, for example, they have undertook activities as afforestation, a revegetation program. They have an ecological restoration program, restoration after forest fires. They have also a forest management program that incorporate multiple use of forest, and these are action measures that are included in the national REDD strategy of Chile. So in the Chile had to meet all the requirements I show in the previous slide. So this money come now through the accredited entity, and then to distribute, and we can pass to the next one. Okay, this is like just to show the process that Chile has followed at the national level to complete the different requirements to access the resource-based payment. So they started in 2010 with the involvement of stakeholders at the different levels of the state to design and consult the national REDD strategy that is called a National Strategy for Climate Change and Vegetational Resources. They started to work at the technical and institutional level to fix and set the reference level to be submitted under the convention, to strengthen their national forest monitoring system, and to design and plan for implementation of the environment and social safeguards. Then they had to, once all elements were in place, they started to pilot some of these activities, and in parallel, they started to apply to the GCF pilot program that was launched in 2017, and to access this resource. Now that the resource come from the GCF, in the next slide, they define it also and benefit sharing system to channel this resource from the national to the local level. So they defined some principles to distribute the result-based finance into the 5 regions that that demonstrate the results to the UNFCCC. I want to highlight that as per the UNFCCC decision, countries could start with a subnational approach as intermediate step, but countries should go into the national approach with as long as they are progressing in and strengthening their national policies. So in the case of Chile, 5 regions demonstrated the results, and the money is distributed into the regions according with the principles of equity, effectiveness, and solidarity. And then they have and they have already implemented this public platform to call for proposal with a specific criteria to allow indigenous communities, to allow gender equity in the presentation, to respond to this call for proposals from the local stakeholders. So Chile, for example, has made the first call this year. They are analyzing the number of proposals that were presented, and the implementation of this proposal with the result-based payment will start next year once this assessment process of the responses are made by the government. So I think this is the last slide. So this is the time for the questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Lucio and Lucy, for this presentation. Well, very comprehensive yet accessible. So thank you also to all participants for sharing the question. We'll try to group them and assign them to relevant speakers. Just a quick comment beforehand. Some of the questions related to carbon credits and carbon payments, we're going to park them for now, because some of them will be addressed already by Marina in her presentation. Yeah. So maybe starting with a few questions addressed at Lucy. So the first one would be whether payments are conditional to activities, to agreed upon activities, or to agreed upon results and impact. And then, and I think you've answered that to some extent in your presentation, but which kind of activities and which kind of organizations, meaning NGOs, private entities, and social enterprises, can be involved and be financed for landscape restoration? So maybe starting with those questions for Lucy.
That's one. Thank you, Florian. I think with the first one, if we're looking at results-based payments, such as payments for ecosystem services, they are not as, if they are not related to a standard that often carbon payments are and verified, that sometimes there are not as strict payment schemes that are related to activities with an expected outcome rather than specific outcomes themselves. But more often than not is very much related to the impact and the outcome, which obviously has to be verified either at local level or when you're talking about carbon. Often there are very strict standards and certification bodies related to that, which I know that Marina will go into more detail. When it comes to different landscape restoration activities and who initiates them and how they can be implemented, it really depends on the landscape and how the activities required. It's very context specific. More often than not, when we're looking at landscapes, there is often a large, there's a group or a partnership of landscape actors that involve both local level communities, governments, as well as private sector actors that are either acting within the landscape and utilizing the resources or are looking to offset. So maybe more external partners. So, and often they work together to create sort of more a coordinated approach to restore landscape, which would then look to understanding what type of landscape restoration would be required in that context by who. But they can be initiated by NGOs or private entities. So it's very much context specific, and often and a lot of times that coordination between both public and private sector occurs to look at sort of landscape scale restoration rather than just sort of reforestation in small patches.
Thank you, Lucy. Thank you very much. A few questions for Lucio as well. I think the first one relates to how REDD plus projects are monitored first. How are the results verified by whom? And how the funds are disbursed first to the host country or jurisdiction and then down towards the beneficiaries. So maybe if you can say a few words about that. And the follow-up question would be, how is the finance from REDD administered and shared between the different stakeholders, meaning how much is disbursed for social outcomes, how much can be used and spent to cover the operational cost of the implementing agencies?
Yes. Thank you, Florian. Could you repeat the second one, please?
Yes, the second one relates to how the funds can be used. How, if there is guidance or obligation on how much should be, disbursed for local communities for social outcomes, and how much can be used by the implementing agencies, meaning, NGOs and organizations that are actually implementing the activities on the ground.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for the question. So regarding the first one, who assess the results and who assess the reference level and how it is monitoring, the technical guidance are set up in the Warsaw framework under the UNFCCC decisions that define the IPCC technical guidance and principles that should use the countries to construct the reference level. For example, the countries has to gather historical information about the rates of deforestation, just to mention one of the activities that have been measured using the National Forest Monitoring System that has been designed by the country. So it's why, as I showed in the slide, the 4 requirements that countries need to apply for result-based payment is to design and implement a national forest monitoring system that is led obviously by the institutions, national institutions. Once the national forest monitoring system is in place, countries have to gather all the information to construct the reference level, to submit this reference level to the convention that will be assessed by the roster of experts that are part of the convention. Those roster of experts are built by nominations that the countries themselves made to the UNFCCC. Similarly, with the results, once the countries have
source, une fois que vous avez acquis ce niveau, les pays doivent estimer les ressources et la production et les mouvements des pays contre les mouvements de fréquence, les ressources auxquelles ils sont soumis au niveau des atouts.
It's a process that are guided by these steps, and then basically once the result-based payment, and just to chain with the next question, the proceeds from the result-based payment will be used according to the national strategy and the action measures that country has previously defined in their action plan, that are according with the national circumstances, with the consultation process with stakeholders when countries designed the REDD+ strategy, and is disbursed to the local stakeholders through the benefit sharing system established by countries. For example, in the case of Chile, they assigned 20% of the total proceeds from the result-based payment for the general technical monitoring and administrative process of the operational of these funds, and the 80% should be disbursed directly to the local communities through this public platform that allows local smallholders to access the proceeds of the result-based payment of that the country got from the GCF.
Thank you very much, Lucio. I think that was very clear. Maybe one last question. Maybe if your insight on what the future of REDD Plus and this kind of compliance market will look like. As you have explained and illustrated, there have been some examples of disbursements made to countries like Indonesia, Chile, and so on. How do you see it evolving over the next few years? And could you give us an idea of the scale of financing that would be available in the years to come?
Yes, so there are some emerging initiatives. I think that the biggest right now is the LEAF coalition that has pledged $1.5 billion to be disbursed to countries or jurisdictions that will be able to demonstrate results for the period from 2022 to 2026. They defined a standard that is called R3s as the requirements that should be demonstrated for countries in order to access those results. So they have made so far 2 calls for interest for countries and jurisdictions, and it is one of the combined sources of finance because it's public, international public and private finance that will come into through this channel. And maybe also from the second phase of the pilot program under the GCF, it was used in the COP that finished yesterday, Sunday, yes. There is a call from countries, from the COP to the GCF and to the board of the GCF to activate the second phase of the GCF REDD Plus pilot program. So in line with the NDC's needs of countries to channel finance to implement the forest mitigation action. So and of course we have but Marina will speak about that, the dynamic growing of the carbon market opportunities that has been very dynamic in the last 2 years, and maybe with some expectations regarding also the possibilities that would be available in the frame of the Article 6 of the Paris Agreement in related with the international cooperation and potentially international compliance carbon markets to support other countries to achieve their NDCs under the UNFCCC.
Thank you, Lucio. And I think this was a very good introduction to Marina's section on carbon finance mechanism. So please.